Okay, welcome everyone to the Shona Foundation Library Poetry Tour. This is the final tour of this season. We want to start off by thanking the Milford Cultural Council, the Uxbridge Cultural Council, and the Mass Cultural Council who supports us with this program, and we're very grateful to their generosity so we can continue to do this program. We run it 5 times a year, pretty much quarterly, and then we drop in on the Library Poetry Month, National Poetry Month, where we also have a reading. I believe that's in April. So this November, because normally November is dark and we really haven't been sure how many people come, I figured I would read this time. And normally we pay the poets, but because I'm the executive director of the Shona Foundation, I am not paying myself. We are donating the money to the Milford Library for helping us. So I'm going to start with a poem by Tony Brown. Now, Tony used to host this program. Unfortunately, Tony had several strokes, so he can't do this. And I don't think I'd be a poet were it not for Tony Brown. I grew up with Tony, Art in the back, grew up with Tony, and Tony's just been an amazing poet since I've known him, since high school. And he eventually won the Stanley Kunitz Medal Award in Worcester for his work in poetry, which is a high honor. To honor Tony while we're doing this, I thought I'd start with a poem by Tony from this book. It's called Narrow Path, Falling Rock, Meditations in a Leap Year. He wrote this in the year 2000, and he wrote a poem every day for the month of February during leap year. He writes a poem every day now if you follow him on Facebook. He's unbelievably prolific. So this is called Tutu, or I guess February 2nd, by Tony Brown. Poetry can't be about itself, is never not about itself. Sits there like a mountain, then floats away, leaving you wanting. Opens doors in the sides of concepts, then lands on your toes over and over again, until you are unable to walk without remembering that you've been modified by a poem that is insubstantial by definition, yet is enough. So I thought, what better way to start off a poetry reading than a poem about poetry. So I'm going to read now a short poem, Ghosts, from my book. I have a book, it's called Catholics Surviving Abuse and Other Dead End Roads. I was very, very fortunate to have this happen. I'm a survivor of clergy sexual abuse in both St. Mary's and Uxbridge and the House of Affirmation in Whitensville. And I had all these paintings. I used to do paintings, I still do. And I had an exhibit with my poetry in Uxbridge, which really isn't an exhibit, like who's coming to Uxbridge to look at artwork. So, but one day I was at a graduation party, high school graduation party, and this couple said, "Hey, can you let us into your gallery space tomorrow?" An elderly couple. And I was about to say no because the following day was my stepson Andrew's graduation party, but my wife said, "No, open up for them." And when I opened up for them, they got very emotional. That's when I realized that the day before I was at their grandson's graduation party, his father wasn't there because he had killed himself, and he had been abused the same time I was. And so I thought, oh, okay, they're saying, "Oh my God, you have to get this out of here. This should be in New York." And I'm thinking, if I could have my artwork in New York, it would be in New York. I have no idea how to do that. So I went home and had, I think the older crowd will get this, I had my Mickey Rooney moment. I said, "I'm going to put on a show." So I went home in June of 2005 and started writing a one-man show. And I was on stage that December in the Bowery Poetry Club in New York, run by Bob Holman. And in the audience was the publisher of Catherine James Publishing, who published the book. So it was just luck that guy was there, that I have this book, because it's hard to get anything published, let alone poetry. So this is called Ghosts from the book, and I think this whole reading is going to be a lot about ghosts. Am I living in the present, solely in the moment, if in my sights I see ghosts? Ghosts that cast their long gray shadows over my walls of the immediate instant, making my vision dim. If my past insists on being part of my present, where now am I? I think all of us, I'm projecting, have a hard time being in the moment. But I'm going to go right to the past. I think it's important to explain why we have a poetry program under the Shauna Foundation. Shauna's my daughter. We lost Shauna at the age of 16 on August 11th in 1999. She was an identical twin. She was also the first published poet in the family. She had her poem published in third grade, in the third grade school newsletter, and it's called A Cold Mouse. It's a haiku. A small little mouse walking along the sidewalk, shivering so much. You'll see as the reading progresses where she got her sunny disposition from. Although it can also be the sunny disposition just from being in New England. Like New England is like scary. And I make horror movies, low budget horror movies, and I made a folk horror movie. And I think folk horror, in a lot of ways starts here with the Salem witch trials. I mean, I think that it's just creepy here. So this is the woods of New England. When the woods of New England prepare to bed down for the winter, when the light of the day transforms immediately from dawn to dusk, before the trees drop their dead leaves on the earth, they leave us with a blaze of delightful colors, disguising the danger within, waiting to devour us, as the trees pass into a peaceful sleep, ignoring our cries. This is called The Path. As I was roaming the woods in the midnight dark and the full moon shade of the trees, I stayed faithful to the path and guidebook of this region. A man, a stranger, bumped into me, slamming my right shoulder hard, knocking his lit camel from his right hand into the pine needles, igniting and smoldering the needles. He was moving in the opposite direction as I was, going to where I had once been, or so I thought. For I had never turned around to see my past steps. I hadn't seen him coming, my head bent down 90 degrees, counting the eyes of my shoes. Good Lord, I shouted as I smelled the bourbon breathing back into my face, his bourbon and stale smoke. Good Lord, he replied. With his thumb and index finger conducting Bach on his chin. If Jesus had died for our sins, he continued, as he glanced at the flames, showing years of concern carved into his face, wouldn't it make sense to make Judas a saint? He asked as he lit another camel, drawing it as deep as the night, as long as my life. Do you think he's treated good in heaven? He had stopped me. Oh, I'm sure he's there. He must be. The plan wouldn't have worked without him. He met my eye, and he saw the hole right through me. Do you think he's treated good? Like the way they may treat you. And then he was gone without a breeze or a snap of a branch or a glimmer of hope. I sure as hell hope so, was all I could think, all I could say as I watched the fire grow, bringing warmth and light and confusion. I had lost my direction, my way, which wasn't mine. I sure as hell hope so. Creepy New England. I decided I have some covers that I'm doing, and the poet that I think, besides Tony, who really was a big influence on me young, to get me really to love this art form, was Walt Whitman. And this is probably my favorite poem of all time, because it's always, always, always relevant. It's called I Sit and Look Out. I sit and look out upon all the sorrows of the world and upon all the oppression and shame. I hear the secret convulsive sobs of young men in anguish with themselves, remorseful after deeds done. I see in low life a mother misused by her children, dying, neglected, gaunt, desperate. I see the wife misused by her husband. I see the treacherous seducer of young women. I mark the ranklings of jealousy and unrequited love, attempted to be hid. I see these sights on earth. I see the workings of battle, pestilence, tyranny. I see martyrs and prisoners. I observe a famine at sea. I observe the sailors casting lots who shall be killed to preserve the lives of the rest. I observe the sights and degradations cast by arrogant persons upon the laborers, the poor, upon the Negroes and the like. All of this meanness and agony without end, I sitting, look out upon, see, hear, and am silent. I think that is as relevant today as it's ever been on many different levels. So there's the opposite of being silent. There's being very loud. So this is also from the book. It's called The Prodigal Son. I am the prodigal son, returning on my own terms, sent not to help with the harvest, but to burn your fields down. There will be no feast or breaking of bread. The breaking will be of idols, both false and true, and of superstitions and beliefs. My brother will not conspire against me, but become enlightened and enraged and join the cause, against your counterfeit kingdom, against your controlled and suffering bliss, against you and your kind. The sin of silent acceptance has been absolved, and those with just ears shall listen, those with just feet shall stand, those with just tongues shall speak, those with just hearts shall weep, those with just eyes shall see the lies and corruption of you high priests. They will recognize the sinners as I recognize the sinners, because I am one, as Father are you. It is time for the meek to inherit the earth, and I'm here to help move it along. It's a little angry. It's a little bit of anger there. And as I explained my history with the church, but I think you could remove the church from that and just look at politics today. And I think you can see that anger. And I don't care whose bumper sticker is on your car, you can hear that anger. It seems to be this binary thing right now of this amount of anger. So the next, I wanted to get a little bit away from the binary thinking with the next piece. I brought props, which is in this book called The Outlaw Bible of American Poetry. It's a great book of, I guess, outlaw poetry. I'm not really sure if any poetry here has ever really been outlawed, but it's a good title. I'm guessing it's just, to be subversive. And they're very generous with who they say are poets. Because I'm going to read an untitled poet by Jackson Pollock, the painter. Now, Jackson Pollock was an abstract expressionist, and that whole movement came about at the end of World War II, after we saw the concentration camps, after the drop of the atomic bomb, and it was just the absurdity of how we're all treated. And he wrote it. I don't know if you can see it, but he did the tab in and then lines, tab in, then lines. And I look at someone like E.E. Cummings, who I think really transformed poetry with how a poem looked on a page, as opposed to just writing it in verse. But he was again part of the Dada movement, which also looked at the absurdity of everything at the time. The Dada movement of art was mostly I'm going to steal this from David Byrne, was to use nonsense to make sense of a world that didn't make sense. So this is called Untitled by Jackson Pollock. Technique is the result of a need. A new need demands new techniques, total control, denial of the accident, state of order, organic intensity, energy and motion made visible, memories arrested in space, human needs and motives, acceptance. And I think all of this anger is about acceptance. Everyone wants to be accepted, and with the Catholic themes, I always laugh as I say this stuff that I have here. It's for me, it all boils down to, and I think every organized religion has this, and even the humanists have this, and it's the golden rule: treat each other as you want to be treated. Humanists are, it's a wonderful organization of atheists. And I think that maybe we need to get back to that. We need a change. So we're now going to read another poem from this book called Change, the Moon Poem. To be a crazy man in a small one, you got to walk around late at night to talk to yourself, keeping your insanity tucked in your back pocket during the day. The circle around the radius of the heart of my small town is 4 miles, which is pretty good, as its heart stopped beating years ago. On a full, moonlit night, as I walked, pulling my insanity out and placing it under my hat, still invisible to others who might recognize me, but better when close to my thoughts than my shit. On these nights, as I move forward, or seemingly move forward as I'm really just going in circles, I see the moon and my shadow fall ahead of me, as man-made streetlights have always taught me more than anything made by God. My past illuminates my steps as a guard walks an inmate to his court-ordered death, because the lessons of my life's experience are all I have now, and all I will ever take with me. Yet I can still learn lessons from nature, not God, never confusing the two, but from my friend the moon, who tells me it's okay to travel in circles, but you just might want to widen it. It's okay to be full and bright, so bright as to radiate and expose hidden truths in the shadows of the dark. It's okay to wane and stay in the dark, not reflective at all, and just rest. It's okay to be blue, tired and sad by all that you have seen and done with actions or inactions. It's okay to be new and break free of these burdens and start fresh with hope. It's okay to cycle like this because tired old truths that have become so cliched that they are just repeated as a corrupted MP3, dirty CD, or scratched record, or a crazy person walking the streets at night. Change is the only constant, and we will constantly cycle our emotions as we try to maintain balance. Happiness will shine like daylight at midnight, and sadness will cover the light with its darkest possible clouds, only to change again the moment it begins. And when I finish my walk and open my door, I place my insanity in my heart and resolve to love and embrace it, because it's the only ground I have, the only foundation to accept the change, and is the only stability I will ever know. I have a lot of like Dark Woods and Moon stuff in there, and it's almost New England mystic and things otherworldly, and some things are otherworldly because, as I mentioned earlier, Shauna was killed in a car accident on August 11th in 1999. She's a twin, 16 years old, and afterwards we were cleaning her room when we found this poem she wrote. It's called Goodbye. Goodbye by Shauna. Goodbye to all of the loving faces I'm impressed with every day. Goodbye to the only thing I know is home. Goodbye to my friends, my past friends, my best friends. Goodbye to the early mornings and the late afternoons at school. Goodbye to the teachers that helped me become who I am today. Goodbye to all of the people I've ever talked to but yet become so close to. Goodbye to the crowded hallway that we have all pushed our way through. Goodbye to all the bad memories and the good. Goodbye to the fun dances and proms we all loved. Goodbye to Uxbridge High School, but forever let it stay in our minds. She was going to be a junior when she wrote this. It's as if she knew, which would explain a lot of how she behaved. Her sister, her twin sister, identical twin sister, Erin, was second in her class. If, like, Shauna got a C, like, way to go. But what did school matter to her? It didn't mean anything because she wasn't going to be around. So that's why we have a scholarship in Uxbridge. That actually, this whole foundation started on a scholarship. And it goes to the average student. We don't give it to the top student. We give it to an average student. So after Shauna died, what is one to do? I'm Irish, but I don't drink. So I guess you write a poem. Is that what the Irish do? So this is she rode her own wave And this is actually the poem that goes along with the foundation itself. It was written for Shauna, but I'm going to read it tonight for her sister that we also just lost, Alana. Alana Phoenix, I'm going to cry, just died from ALS at 48. When I was putting this together, I looked at this poem and I thought, shit, this is as much about her as it is Shauna. She rode her own wave, which is also in this book. She rode her own wave, inviting any and all on, but never drifting off on others. It was a large wave with a direct route to the shore, passing us as the undertow pulls us further out. I can see her footsteps extend on the beach, extend out of reach, as I drift towards the storm, into the storm, the gale-force wind of the soul, the blind hurricane with no name. Unable to swim, I can barely tread water, but it is all that I can do, hoping that when I catch my wave, I land safely and softly on her shore and follow her footsteps in the sand. So this is the last poem that I'm going to do, and this goes back to the Bowery Poetry Club and Bob Holman. I think Bob booked the show with me because of this poem. It's called Songs of Morning. Bob used to run a thing called, remember, I don't know if you remember, there was a thing online called About. It was about poetry, about plumbing, about whatever. And Bob managed the About Poetry page. And it was 2 years after 9/11. Today, people write poems and reflect on 9/11. And for me, grieving is a very private thing here. No one here goes wailing in the streets when they lose loved ones like other cultures do. Stiff upper lip and all that. So I thought at 9/11, everyone was grieving. Everyone was grieving, and it was kind of almost safe for me to go out and grieve. So I wrote this poem, he accepted it, and he put it online on the About Poetry. This is, I think, a lesson for any artist because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. So a few years later, I get a phone call from Nancy Lee. This is a textbook anthology called Lyrics of Lament. And she asked me, hey, can I put your poem in my book? Sure. Then she said, oh, that's good. I only have one other 9/11 poem. It's by Bruce Springsteen. Not in bad company. Me and Bruce go way back. It's ironic to me that I'm a person with a high school diploma, that I have a poem in a college textbook. But after that, I get another phone call from a person who was running an event, the 10th anniversary of 9/11 in New York at Symphony Space. And she said, jazz trumpeter John Faddis wants to read your poem at this performance at Symphony Space on the Remembrance concert. And I said, sure. And the New York Times review of the show said that was the highlight of the show. Him reading my poem and then doing his song. Now, I can say this as an artist who I have, gotten a lot of awards and nominated. I've been nominated for an Emmy, nominated for things. That was the highlight of my artistic career, having John read this poem in New York. I can't fathom how amazing that was to me. I didn't go. It was going to be too emotional. I put my bike on the back of the car and I rode down the Cape and just rode my bicycle around on a very beautiful day. But I think it speaks to whenever you put something out there, you have no idea who you're touching and what may happen with it. It can almost be miraculous at times. This is called Songs of Mourning. I do not mourn for New York because its songs can't die. And New York is our song, America's song. Yet I stand in disbelief knowing we all die. My Shauna died for no reason at all and without a song. Just the silence of breaks. And I can't comprehend either. I can only hear the sound of New York emanating from Westchester Hills Cemetery. Gershwin's blues rhapsodizing the blood red of fire stations, while from the Bronx, Miles plays his own kind of blues to soothe us all, as Irving Berlin's God Bless America ends with a question mark. Over in Brooklyn, Bernstein's West Side Stories has spread over its borders into Manhattan, as tragedies might magnify, while Coltrane's Love Supreme struggles to belong. Yet the sound that captures me and my posture the most is the final chord struck by Johnny Thunders from Flushing, reverberating like the sound of God crying down from his own creation, spiraling downwards once again. And I still don't mourn for New York. I will sing because they give me the gift of a song to mourn with. Thank you. So normally at this time, I come up with the poet and open it up to the Q&A. And here I am. So does anyone have any questions or comments?
Who's the jazz trumpeter again?
John Faddis, Faddis. He's no, but if you listen to him, you'll go, oh my God, it's just incredible. He's a very generous man. He's donated to the foundation many times since. Very kind man.
So, this is an awkward question because I should know the answer to this, knowing you for so long, but how do you go from one artistic form of expression, poetry, to filmmaking, to painting, all these things I know you do? How do you just decide to just hopscotch? Do you do them all at once? Or do you find yourself in little niches? Do you have a poetry period of your life?
No, I have this, I call it the well theory. So when one artistic well goes dry, I just find another well that's loaded with water. That's it. That's what I do. Okay, I got nothing here. Let me try something else. And it was, I because of the one-man show, that's what morphed into acting and then ultimately filmmaking. So sometimes things just have their own trajectory. But I because of this, the Woods poem that I at the very beginning of this, not the path, but the Woods. I wrote this like 3 days ago, many times to get it to where I wanted it to be. But that seems to have popped back.
So the different well thing is interesting, but one thing that kind of the opposite that occurred to me the other day, and I wonder if this ever happened to you, because again, all these different wells you get to draw from, but I happened to be driving up 146, and I noticed that the moon was like dead center in front of me, and I was like, wow, that is so cool. And then I looked in my rearview mirror, and the sun was dead center in my mirror behind me, and I thought, now, how do I convey that? First of all, I can't paint, so I don't have that. But it's just like the idea, like, if something just strikes you, you go, okay, well, where do I go with this? Or maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just what I hold, and it's not for sharing. I don't know, but it's just weird, and that's where I always wonder when somebody has so many different things they do. How do they say this is going to be a painting, or this is going to be a film, or this is going to be a poem?
Well, the thing with filmmaking is that it's all of them, because each shot is a painting. How do I compose it? I'm writing the script, so how do I have them speak? So that is the art form where I've been able to combine everything. Mm-hmm. But it's exhausting. It's like it's a lot of work. So, but that one, I think for a while I loved it because it was all of it, and I still was very well. You've been on my sets. It's not always strict either. Mm-hmm. I do. It's fairly loose. I try to keep it fun, but it has been up till now because I think I'm drifting away from filmmaking. Not that the well's dry. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think I've said what I need to say, and now let's do something else.
That's a brave thing to do, though, is to always be trying something new when you know you have the gift of writing poetry and painting, but then to try something new, that's That's brave.
Oh, I don't know. It's more boredom, but than brave. Thank you for saying that, but I think that's just how I've always been. I don't know anything else.
Yeah. So now you said that you didn't always write poetry, that there was a particular person that kind of led you in that direction.
Well, yeah, that would be Tony, Tony Brown, and that was more. At that time, I was doing visual arts and plays, where we were writing and producing plays, and Tony was always writing poetry. And then we'd go to his readings. We'd always support him, and then it just fascinated me the culture in particular in Worcester and Providence of poets. Of course, we were all young then. It was Tony actually said in a post today, he said all the readings that he sees listed today are by middle-aged white men, and luckily you're not at one of those readings because I'm an elderly white man. You can judge by the cardigan. So it was just fascinating watching that world. So then I just would play with words, and also I think music also played a great role in that. At my age, you grew up with Bob Dylan, so lyrics were something that were often. You had to read over and over and over again, because I was a guy who read along with the lyrics. I read who wrote every song. I read who produced the records. I read the album, cover from top to bottom. And Dylan, Springsteen to a lesser degree, but mostly Dylan. I still, whenever he comes around, I still see him, and I'm still completely blown away by what he does. So Tony Brown and Bob Dylan, even though Bruce and I are the only two in this book.
Who's the boss?
Yes. Anything else?
What turned you on to horror movies?
Well, it's a that's a good question. I met a friend, and this was before people were doing it, and I thought, wow, if we did our own web series and directly marketed it to people. We cut out the middleman, because at that point, well, there still is a huge middleman. And so I was at Barnes & Noble one day, and I'm looking at the magazines, and I see these magazines on horses, like 3 different magazines on horses, and I thought, if we did a web series based on horses, we could market directly to them. And then I looked right up, and there was horror. I'm like, what am I doing? This is stupid. So he wrote this big script, and when I did a budget, and the budget still would have been like $500,000. Like, okay, we can't do this. So I said, well, let me take one of those. Let me actually write a short horror thing, and we'll put it out there, and we'll say, best horror for $100, sell it for 99 cents ourselves. And we did, and we made our money back. We're like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then this film festival in Sweden sent me a message and said, hey, can we show you a movie? Film festivals weren't even on my radar to think and consider. And now I run 2. And so I said, sure, you can do that. And I thought, oh, there are people really interested in this. And then I got on LinkedIn, this guy, John Russo, connected. Can we connect? Can we be friends? So let me look him up. And he co-wrote the original Night of the Living Dead. So I looked at my wife and said, I'm a horror guy, because everyone looks for a brand, and I've been handed one. And when I told Erin, Shauna's twin, I think we're going to be making horror movies, she walked me over to my video library and said, no kidding. Because that's pretty much all I own. I was like, oh yeah, I guess maybe this is why I'm doing this. Anything else?
Where do I find you in film?
Both Trinity and Seeds are on Tubi. They're on Prime. I have a very wonderful distribution company, Bayview, that thank God believes in my work. There's a For seeds, I think there's a British YouTube channel that has it, but actually I would say Tubi to watch them because Tubi's free. I think you still have to pay on Prime.
Yeah, but Prime, sure.
So Trinity and Seeds, and Florence is in post right now. And I'm looking at everyone in this room, and I'm not sure I would recommend any of you watch Florence. It's really brutal and graphic. So those of you out there who might like brutal and graphic, wait for my movie Florence.
So they're short or they full?
No, those two, Trinity and Seeds, are features.
Okay.
Yeah, I've made 3 features now. Well, Florence again is in post, but yeah, I'm old, man. It's really tiring. I don't know how people keep doing it. I mean, I do it mostly all myself. I write it, direct it, produce it, edit it. So but I've got, a great core of people locally that I work with, wonderful people. So I'm grateful that I have these core actors that will do anything with me. And at times, during COVID, I wanted some shots of things in Italy and I couldn't go. So I asked an Italian director, Luigi Cosi, who has worked with Dario Argento, and if he would shoot him for me, and he did. If anybody watched Mystery Science Theater 3000, 2000, so you would know Luigi's film Star Crash from that show. Luigi made a movie, actually, I think, Artie, you saw it at the Shauna Festival.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where he's playing himself and he's having a nightmare where this critic's saying, Luigi's the Italian Ed Wood, the Italian Ed Wood. And he wakes up from the nightmare and his wife says, what's the matter? He said, oh, they're saying I'm the Italian Ed Wood. She said, what's the problem? Everyone knows Ed Wood. So, Luigi's a wonderful man. And obviously a great sense of humor about his work.
Can I ask another question?
You can ask as long as they're open, yes.
Do you find your better works are done during, poetry-wise, are done during emotional times as opposed to, calmer, everyday times in your life?
That's a good question because I would say, honestly, I'd say the better work now is the calmer work.
Okay.
And like the sober work. It was amazing. I'm 26 years sober now. But it was amazing how much better my work got once I was sober. You're not that tortured. There's that whole myth out there about, these, tortured geniuses who are drug addicts and alcoholics. Pete Townsend said the same thing. Oh my God, my songs are so much better now that I'm sober. Because then you can really, instead of focusing on the emotion, focus on the craft. There was a time when I would get up and I'd write every morning, no matter what. And it didn't matter what. And that actually helped with screenwriting and script writing. But now the Shauna Foundation, which it really is, I think, what I'm going to focus more and more on anyway, has taken time away from that, which is fine, because I really, I think I want to build the foundation up to a pretty good spot before I go. But it's when you're hungover, you don't get up the next morning and think, I have to do my daily writing. You think, where's the Alka-Seltzer? So it's much better now. It doesn't mean it's not emotional. You can put the emotion down, but then you have to go in and massage it and really work the language to get it to where you want. Good question, though. Anything else? All right, thank you all for coming. I want to thank Milford Cable Access, as always, for being here and taping the Library Poetry Tour. Let's give them a big round of applause. I totally appreciate all of their help and support. Thank you all, and I'll be in Uxbridge tomorrow night.